Most people think confusion is always a lack of clarity. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes confusion is nothing more than psychological protection, because seeing something clearly might require change, responsibility, grief, discomfort, action, confrontation, uncertainty. And God, that would actually require you to be a human being and to address the things that scare you or upset you or unbalance you the most. But that's where the learning begins. And the nervous system does not always prioritise truth first, because its priority is your safety. So that's what it prioritises. And this is why people can remain inside situations that are obviously unhealthy from the outside, while internally feeling completely uncertain about what to do. The confusion isn't always intellectual, it's emotional conflict. A great example of that would be like relationship breakups, where one party perceives the other as their old self, not the new version, because that creates uncertainty, imbalance. They don't understand, and it makes them feel on edge. So what does the nervous system do? The nervous system just goes, we're going to fluff this and we're going to protect you. So like I say, it's emotional conflict, because part of the system already knows. Another part fears the consequences of acknowledging it fully, and tension forms between perception and protection. Psychology has explored versions of this for years. One relevant concept is cognitive dissonance. Hope I pronounced that correctly. The discomfort created when reality conflicts with identity, belief, hope, or emotional investment. See, the brain dislikes contradiction, so instead of immediately accepting painful truths, people often distort, delay, minimise, or confuse perception temporarily, not because they're weak, because their nervous system is trying to maintain stability. As I've said, I mean, you can see this everywhere, but relationships, careers, friendships, identity, and also the markets as well, because you know I love that. They're all apparent, and people often say, I don't know what to do, but sometimes deep down they already know. They simply don't yet feel safe enough to face the implications. And that is the difference. Because clarity can be expensive. Clarity, may require leaving, changing direction, disappointing people, admitting denial, accepting loss, confronting patterns, taking responsibility. And psychologically, avoidance can feel safer than disruption in the short term. Human beings constantly fear, or reject is probably a better word, the taking of the responsibility, the confronting those patterns, admitting denial. All of these things, people have to reach deep to be able to be the person that they truly are, to be able to accept those things. And a lot of people won't. And the irony of all of this is, even when disruption would create freedom long term, they still can't do it. It's absolutely bananas. And this is why people get stuck in loops. Not because humans love suffering, Christ no. Because familiarity often feels safer than uncertainty. Now there you go. That's the key. Because familiarity often feels safer than uncertainty. Even unhealthy familiarity. Let that sink in. because I think everybody can relate to that. The nervous system values predictability enormously, especially under stress. And there's another layer to this too. Modern life creates unprecedented levels of informational overload. Too many opinions, too many narratives, too much stimulation, too many inputs competing simultaneously. And eventually the brain struggles to prioritise signal from noise, and decision fatigue builds. Attention fragments, mental clarity weakens. So confusion isn't always emotional avoidance. Sometimes it's cognitive exhaustion. And this matters because overwhelmed people often mistake overload for inability. Not because they're the same thing. Sometimes the issue isn't you don't know. Sometimes the issue is your system is too crowded to hear yourself clearly. And that distinction changes everything. Yeah? Think about how many people never experience genuine silence anymore. No notifications, no scrolling, no external input, no constant stimulation, very little uninterrupted thought. And then they wonder why internal clarity feels distant. But clarity often emerges from reduction, not accumulation. There's an interesting psychological effect here too. Under stress, humans tend to seek certainty rapidly, even false certainty. That's why emotionally overwhelmed people often attach themselves to rigid narratives, black and white thinking, impulsive decisions, external validation, emotionally charged explanations. The brain wants resolution, and quickly, because unresolved ambiguity consumes energy like you would not believe. But mature perception requires tolerating uncertainty temporarily. That's difficult because most people rush to conclusions before ambiguity feels uncomfortable psychologically. Yet rushing often distorts observation. And I'll bring it up, markets expose this beautifully. People become desperate for certainty. At tops, at bottoms, during volatility, during fear, during euphoria. Everybody wants immediate answers, immediate direction, immediate prediction. And ironically, the urgency often clouds perception the most. Because emotional intensity, of course, narrows objectivity. Human relationships work similarly. Sometimes people remain confused because the emotional investment is too large to process honestly all at once. The nervous system delays full recognition gradually. Not maliciously, protectively. And eventually the truth becomes undeniable through repetition. Patterns accumulate, signals repeat, energy shifts, behaviour clarifies, and suddenly somebody says, I knew for a long time. Usually they did. Well, partially, quietly. This is why observation matters more than emotional panic, because panic distorts, whereas observation clarifies. And honestly, a lot of healing is not learning new information. It's becoming able to tolerate reality without fleeing from it psychologically. And that's maturity. The ability to remain present long enough to see clearly without collapsing into denial, distraction, urgency, fantasy, avoidance, emotional flooding. Stillness becomes important here. Not passive stillness, observational stillness. The ability to pause long enough for noise to settle, because when internal noise lowers, hidden structure becomes visible. There's something fascinating about the body too. The body often recognises truth before the conscious mind fully accepts it. Tension increases, energy changes, fatigue appears, avoidance behaviours emerge, and attention shifts. The nervous system starts responding before conscious language catches up, and many people ignore these signals repeatedly because they're waiting for perfect intellectual certainty. But perception often arrives gradually, layer by layer. The goal is not ruthless hyper-analysis, it's honest observation, without emotional distortion, without unnecessary narrative, and without avoidance. Because confusion is not always evidence that nothing is wrong. Sometimes confusion is what happens when truth and fear occupy the same space simultaneously. And once you understand that, you become gentler with yourself, but also more honest. Because eventually, clarity asks to be faced. Quietly at first, then repeatedly, then unmistakably, hidden in plain sight. Anchoring light and awakening strength. The equilibrium path unfolds.